like to call to order the Joint Committees on Housing and Water and Land. We're here today. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. We're here today on Thursday, March 17th, 2022 at 11 a.m. And this is by video conference, and we are in conference room 309 at the state capitol. We have 3 items on our agenda, and the first item is SB 2583 SD2 relating to public lands for HHFDC. First up, we have Denise Iseri Matsubara from HHFDC.
Good afternoon, chairs, members of the Joint Committee, Denise Matsubara for HHFDC. We stand on our written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. Next up, we have Kevin Moore from DLNR. Or Russell Tsuji from DLNR. Okay.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair. It's Russell Tsuji for DLNR. We'll stand on our no objection to this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Bronson Azama from Ko'olaupoko Hawaiian Civic Club. No, not present. Thank you. In opposition. Okay. Would anyone else like to comment on this measure? Okay. Members, any questions?
Waterland members, any questions?
Okay, then let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is SB 3261 SD2, establishes the Aloha Homes program to develop low-cost homes on state-owned and county-owned lands in urban development sites. First up, we have Denise Iseri Matsubara from HHFDC.
Good morning, chairs, members of the Joint Committee, Denise Matsubara for HHFDC. This measure seeks to establish the Aloha Homes program. Similar versions, as you know, have been first introduced in 2019, and at the time, the legislature commissioned a study, and that study concluded that the Aloha Homes program could not be feasibly replicated in Hawaii for a variety of reasons articulated in our written testimony, which is why we cannot support this measure. HHFDC is committed to working with the legislature on increasing the state's housing supply. However, we're unable to support mainly because of the lingering concern in designating HHFDC as the developer. As you know, development is a long, complicated, and risky business. If the state assumes the role of developer, the state will be assuming all the risks inherent with that role, including the risk of marketability, price increases, schedule delays, and lawsuits by purchasers. Further, having design and construction become subject to procurement will only serve to slow down the process. This is why we partner with developers to expedite delivery of affordable housing and reduce the risk to the state. In conclusion, HHFDC appreciates the legislature's recognition of the need for a market study to determine if sufficient demand exists for this type of long-term leasehold product as opposed to fee-simple products, and also the formation of a working group to continue the discussion. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Denise. Next up, we have Craig Hurai from the Department of Budget and Finance with comments. Wayne Tanaka, Sierra Club of Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair Nakamura, Chair Tarnas, members of the committees, Wayne Tanaka with the Sierra Club. We do oppose this measure as drafted. However, we do think that a couple really simple amendments could address the concerns and meet the intent of this measure to balance the need to protect our public land base and while also facilitating affordable housing. So I just like to respectfully ask the committees consider our proposed amendments if you do choose to move this measure forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Next up, we have Gary Simon, Policy Advisor for Elder Affairs. In support, John Kawamoto, Church of the Crossroads,
So aloha, I'm John Kawamoto, testifying on behalf of the Church of the Crossroads in support of this bill. Hawaii's housing prices are so high that people are moving to the mainland where they can find less expensive housing. Many young people who attend college on the mainland decide to stay there after graduation because of housing. This trend has dire long-term consequences because it undercuts the quality of Hawaii's workforce. Without a skilled, educated workforce, Hawaii's economy is destined to spiral downward. DBEDT estimates that the housing shortage for families earning no more than 60% of the area median income will be 22,000 housing units by 2025 to cover the large pent-up need and the increased need. An array of programs have been created to build more affordable housing, but these efforts are associated with high unit costs. For example, the front page headline of today's Star Advertiser says that the legislature is considering appropriating $300 million for an affordable housing program that provides housing for families earning no more than 60% of the area median income. It's a lot of money, but the fine print says that the $300 million would build fewer than 2,000 homes and rehabilitate only 800 units. At this rate, $300 million would have to be appropriated for each of 7 years to fill the need, and this is highly unlikely. The $300 million may not even be appropriated this year. Hawaii needs big ideas like Aloha Homes, which brings down the cost of housing development by using state land. The cost of land typically represents 1/3 of the total cost of housing development, but for Aloha Homes, the land cost would be zero. The Aloha Homes bill is the only proposal being considered by the legislature that can realistically fill the total need for housing in Hawaii. Mahalo for your kind attention.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have Fu Pham from Faith Action Housing in support. Ted Kefalis, Grassroots Institute of Hawaii.
Aloha, chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committees. My name is Ted Kefalis. I'm the Director of Strategic Campaigns for the Grassroots Institute. Like many, we at the Grassroots Institute share a concern about the lack of affordable homes here in Hawaii. However, we believe the proposed Aloha Homes bill would ultimately fail in its mission. While there have been a number of amendments to this bill in order to address some of the costs and feasibility issues involved, those changes we do not feel have been enough to fix a fundamentally flawed bill. Our greatest concern centers around the 99-year leases that are at the heart of the Aloha Homes program. Buying a program with a 99-year lease means that one day the property will no longer belong to the buyer, and there's no incentive to improve or even maintain the units. Additionally, this bill says that if the owner of a unit wants to ever sell, the state would get the right of first refusal. Moreover, the price at which an owner could sell is fixed according to a formula determined by the state. The answer to the lack of affordable housing is not to offer low-income residents a poor deal on government housing projects, but rather to increase the supply of homes available for sale or rent. I hope that you all please take a look at Tokyo, Japan, where deregulating land use and simplifying zoning laws has substantially increased housing development. Every year, the city adds about 100,000 new homes, which has exceeded the metro area's population growth, leading to a housing surplus. Mahalo for your time, and thank you for taking this information into consideration.
Thank you, Ted. Next up, we have Kenna Stormo Gibson from the Hawaii Budget and Policy Center in person.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. I did a lot of research on Aloha Homes study, and I think that the concept of leasehold housing is a good one. People need an option that's not just rent or not just for sale, private market, because a lot of people cannot afford the current prices. Most people who depend on a wage based in Hawaii cannot afford current home prices. And we all know down payments are really, really large compared to income. I wanted to comment on a couple testifiers right now. One is John Kawamoto. He brought up that, $300 million for 2,000 homes. It seems expensive. It's not. It's not expensive because if you think about it, that's $150,000 for a home. You might have 4 people in that home, 5 people in that home, and that home might last 20 years before it needs renovation. Okay, so now you're talking maybe $8,000 a year for a family to be able to stay here and have it be affordable. Have that house be 30% of their income. I don't think $150,000 for 20 years of a family being able to stay and not have to move, not have to leave, actually have 70% of their income to pay for other things. I think that's a good deal. So I just want to say that, yes, it is going to cost money, but what we're doing right now is also very expensive. It's really expensive, all the people that we're losing. And then the other point I want to bring up is the Grassroots Institute talks about Tokyo, that they build 100,000 homes a year. Well, I don't think anyone in Hawaii wants to be building that many homes to satisfy the demand on the world market. I'm pretty sure if I wanted to buy a house in Tokyo right now, I couldn't. They have a lot of regulations. I can't just go on Zillow and buy a house in Tokyo. You can do that here. We literally have a global market. Anyone on the planet can come, go on Zillow and buy a house. So I just want to put out that there's a middle path. There's a middle path. Yeah?
Thank you, Kenna.
Thank you.
Next, we have late testimony from Bronson Azama, Ko'olapoko Hawaiian Civic Club, and Kaleo o na Opio.
Aloha kako kalamai andago. But just standing in support of our written testimony in opposition, but at the same time also recognizing that from one of the previous testifiers, I believe it was the Sierra Club with Wayne Tanaka guys, are proposing amendments, and if those amendments are added, then there may be a change in position on our end. So mahalo nei for the time and opportunity to speak, and also just to comment even on another previous testifier regarding all the lease changes and concerns with the 99-year leases and even the amount of regulations that the state puts into this measure. I think those things are good because I think far too often do we see like affordable housing development projects be upsold. So I think there does need to be a level of regulation on that issue. So mahalo nei for the opportunity to testify, and aloha malama pono.
Thank you, Bronson, for walking and talking. Next up, we have Kupuna for the Mo'opuna in opposition. Patrick Herney, Habitat for Humanity in support. And let's see, there's 5 other letters of support. Ellen Sofio, MD.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, my letter was not in support. My letter was in opposition to the bill with the potential to modify my stance if it is extensively modified. First, I have some reservations about 201H to begin with, the idea of exempting building projects for affordable housing anywhere in the state from all the environmental, historic preservation, and zoning regulations seems like it's inherently dangerous to me. But if we're going to go down that path, I think that it needs to be very explicit in the language of the bill that this is limited only to state land along the rail or immediate rail corridor. And I noticed that there's one loophole that's pretty obvious, and I don't think the explicit language generally exists yet. And that loophole is that it says that characterizes the land that is available for this as being within a mile of a public transit station. But it allows the definition of a public transit station as, quote unquote, a station connected to a locally preferred alternative for a mass transit project. My concern about that language is that a bus stop potentially could fall under that definition, and that could create a huge loophole for inappropriate siting. The second main concern I have is a much bigger concern. We need to take into account our island's carrying capacity with regard to the availability of water, drinking water, and not just any drinking water that is clean and healthful to drink, unlike the water on about 1/3 of Oahu right now, which I personally know from my job and from research I've done is heavily contaminated with potent carcinogens that far exceed the health limits.
Thank you, Ellen. Can you?
Okay,
Okay.
so
Thank you
I'm
very
just
much for your
saying that we
testimony.
need to base our development related and housing decisions on our carrying capacity, including water quality and availability and
Thank you.
the issue of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellen. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on SB 3261? Okay, seeing no one. Are there any questions, Housing Committee members?
Water land members, questions? Representative Kobayashi.
For HFDC, there are two studies incorporated into this bill. One for leasehold housing, the other for Aloha Homes Working Group. Should both of those studies occur simultaneously, or should one precede the other?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I believe it's one study and it sounds like a working group is created. This is not our bill, so I'm not sure of the intention of the author of the bill, but it appears to call for a market study and then the formation of a working group to study the implementation. So I'm not sure if one should be before the other, but that would be at, up to the legislature.
I mean, but it does make sense that maybe we don't need two studies.
That could be a
Shouldn't
good,
one precede the other?
that you bring up a very good point, Representative. And it may be to start out with just checking the demand for the leasehold, long-term leasehold product. Might be a way to go on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Water land. Seeing no more, back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Then let's go on to the next item and the final item on our agenda, SB 2372 SD2. This is there's a number of components to this bill, but the bottom line is $300 million for the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. First up, we have Denise Kisari Matsubara from HHFDC.
Thank you very much, chairs, members of the Joint Committee. We stand in strong support of this measure that really seeks to help affordable housing, not only with the infusion, but with the exploration of a new program to help the workforce with for-sale units. So I know there's a lot in this measure. We just think it's a really good idea. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness.
Good morning, Chair Nakamura, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chairs and members. I'm Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness and Chair of the Hawaii Interagency Council on Homelessness. I submitted testimony supporting the intent of Part 1 and deferring to HHFDC regarding Part 2. I also appreciate the notable investment in affordable housing proposed in this bill. However, note that the SD2 is significantly different from the original version of the measure, which dealt with having my office identify lands for either Ohana zones or temporary housing. If the measure proceeds, I respectfully request the legislature to consider setting aside a portion of the $300 million for supportive housing, primarily for people coming out of homelessness or vulnerable populations that have a higher level of need. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Craig Hirai, Department of Budget and Finance with comments. Ken Hiraki, Hawaii Realtors in support. Late testimony from Denise Boisvert in support, and Kim Jorgensen in support. Would anyone else here like to testify? Right, then let's see. Any questions, members in the Housing Committee? I have a question for Denise. Denise, there's a section in the bill that takes the $300 million in the rental housing revolving fund and then breaks it down for each county. How would that be, is it practical to implement that portion of the bill?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. I think a breakdown by county is good in concept. I think it helps, to spread the funding to counties. However, the challenge we run into is the criteria is not based on project location to a large degree, although it does give more points to neighbor island projects. The criteria is largely based on the strength of the application period on a number of different factors. So not having the breakdown actually promotes greater flexibility and assurance that the funds will be used in the most efficient manner.
And when we added up the breakdown, it did not add up to $300 million. Was that intentional or unintentional? Do you know?
I believe, I cannot speak for the authors of the bill, but I believe some of that may be attributed to allow for cost increases for projects already in the pipeline. As we've seen with current development, developers are coming back because of the pandemic for increases to keep the project going due to supply chain issues and supply increases.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Waterland members, any questions? No questions? Back to you, Chair.
Okay, then let's recess for decision making. Okay, we are reconvening our joint committee on housing and water and land. And we're going to go through the first measure, which is SB 2583 SD2, the HHFDC Public Land Bill. We would like to recommend approval as is. Are there any questions for the Housing Committee? Let's take the vote.
All right, recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2583 SD2 as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Aquino.
Aye.
Representative Clark.
Aye.
Representative Iligan.
Aye.
Representative Kitagawa.
Aye.
Representative Lepresti is excused. Representative Takumi is an aye. Representative McDermott is excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you.
Water and Land, same recommendation, Senate Bill 2583 SD2 as is. Any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2583 as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Gamden.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Kong. Noted. Representative Morikawa.
Aye.
Representative Ono.
Aye.
And Representative McDermott is excused. The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
The next item is SB 3261 SD2 relating to Aloha Homes. I would like to make a number of amendments, and all the members should have a copy of this, so I'm just going to quickly summarize it. The key ones that we want to do is on page 1, we would like to add some language to section 1. We will be page 2, line 3, deleting a section there. Page 3, line 4, we're going to replace despite these efforts with the legislature finds that. Page 3, line 14, we're deleting a section. Page 4, line 8 to 19, deleting the paragraph. Page 5, deleting lines 1 to 11. Page 5, lines 12, we're replacing replacing number 4, and it's going to read, direct the Housing Finance Development Corporation to form a working group to study the implementation of leasehold housing on state-owned, non-ceded lands near public transit stations. On page 5, line 16, we're going to edit number 5 to read, appropriate funds to the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism for the Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation to fund the facilitation of this working group and study. A number of changes on page 6, 33, minor changes, and page 33, line 8, we would like to add a new section 2 that establishes this working group in cooperation with other counties, and that the working group shall designate a chairperson. The working group is comprised of the director of HHFDC or designee, housing directors from each county or designees, an affordable housing advocate selected by HHFDC, a nonprofit housing developer with experience in publicly financed development selected by the Senate President, a private housing developer with experience in public finance development selected by the House Speaker, and a low-income homeowner assistance program representatives selected by the Senate President. The working group will complete a number of tasks that we have outlined in the handout. And I don't think I need to go through each one, but you can see that it's a very clear description of what the working group outcomes are. Page 34 will replace a section. On line 12, we're going to delete language and do an appropriation out of the general fund to complete this act. And then we also want to identify that the funds will come out of will be expended by HHFDC through Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. We'll be making technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Housing members, do you have any questions? Okay, then let's take the vote.
All right, recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3261 SD2 with amendments. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye and noting the excuse of Representative McDermott, your measure is adopted.
Thank you.
For Water and Land, same recommendation, Senate Bill 3261 SD2 with amendments as described by the Housing Chair. Any questions? Discussion? No?
Quite commendable.
Commendable. Very good. I'll pass that on. Thank you very much. Any other comments or discussion? This is a significant improvement. So thank you very much. Vice Chair for the vote. Senate Bill 3261 SD2 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3261 SD2 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative McDermott for this measure and all future measures. Is there any reservations? Representative Klang? Any further reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair Nakamura.
Thank you, members. The next and final item on the agenda is SB 2372 SD2. This is the $300 million of rental housing revolving fund to HHFDC. The chair would like to move this along as an HD1 with the following amendments. On page 3, line 10, we would like to take out the governor's coordinator of homelessness, trying to figure out what land is suitable. I believe that's best done by HHFDC, who has the expertise, with the assistance of the governor's coordinator on homelessness. So we want to make that one change. On page 4, line 1, again, we want to just substitute coordinator with HHFDC. On page 4, line 17, we want to delete the county breakdown, and we have an application scoring process in place. And we would like to make some technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. The bill contains a defective effective date. So are there any questions, Housing Committee members? Okay, if not, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2372 SD2 with amendments, noting the presence of all members with the excuse of Representative McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you.
Water and Land Committee recommendation same. Senate Bill 2372 SD2 with amendments. Any discussion, questions? Being none, Vice Chair for the vote. 2372 SD2 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2372 SD2 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair Nakamura, to close us out.
Thank you. This joint committee is now adjourned.